everybody. This is Karen.
You could wait.
What am I waiting for?
Because nobody's on.
Oh.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I am Karen, and I am with Karen Lead. And I know Karen has not been doing her podcast for a while, and I'm sure people are wondering what's been going on, and I'm sure she's going to update everybody. I've been encouraging her to continue doing the podcast because
Is someone chasing you?
Oh, sorry. I guess that means I'm talking fast.
Yes. It's just
Okay.
a conversation.
Okay. So I have been
Hi, Chris.
encouraging Karen to continue doing her podcast because it's important for people who are dealing with Alzheimer's, like I am, to have a forum where they can just share information. And when my mom was diagnosed, like everybody else, I went looking for information. The information you get from the doctors is daunting, overwhelming, and scary. And when I read this book from Karen and had hours of conversations with Karen, I realized that we could do this, that my family and I, we could support my mother, and that it would be okay. And from a lot of the other resources that I read, I never got the feeling of like how a family can live with and support their loved one with Alzheimer's. So this has been the only book that I've recommended to my friends, and it was absolutely the only book that I shared with my dad.
Hi, Bill.
And it's written, it's an easy read, which is really important. So it's an easy read, and I often refer to it as, like there was that book when you're pregnant, the big thick book.
What to expect when you're expecting.
Pretty good
Hi,
book,
Paul.
but quite a thick book. And then there was The Girlfriend's Guide to Pregnancy, a nice slim book. And in that book,
Hi, Lee.
topics are covered that are not covered in the other book. And so, like this book, it just makes the Alzheimer's journey real and doable.
Okay, so that was great.
Thank you.
I guess what Karen's trying to say, yes, and she spells her name wrong,
With a K.
but we won't hold that against her. I didn't want to continue the podcast, to be quite honest, and I've just been getting an overwhelming, I guess, appeal to continue, right?
Yeah.
And Karen's one of the people that when I wrote my book. It was cathartic for me. I started journaling when my mom was diagnosed 20 years ago, at the age of 57, in the year 2000. There was nothing on how to live with this disease, and my mom was coming to live with me. Plus, I had a newborn, so I was immediately propelled into the sandwich generation, which is a social work term for when you have a newborn or you have a young child and you are looking after your parent. So you're thus the sandwich. And everything that was written at that time, and oddly enough, even in today's world, was very high level medical, clinical jargon on like what Alzheimer's is, but not how to live with it or how to deal with it or what resources that you possibly need. And so along the way, I was journaling my experiences with my mom, and then I would find out like a new resource, and then so I started kind of like interjecting any new resource based on what I was going through, so chronologically. And so basically the book now is a resource. So what Karen's describing as the Girlfriend's Guide to Pregnancy, or what to expect when you're expecting, it kind of gives you an overview of what you could potentially deal with. And of course, if you know anything about dementia, which is the umbrella term, but Alzheimer's is the most prevalent form of dementia, is that no 2 days are the same. So it's not a cookie cutter where, okay, this stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, it doesn't follow normally, the progression doesn't follow neatly and tidily. It can go up and down and around, and so you never know what to expect. But this is sort of like what I went through with my mom, and my mom obviously passed away in January, and so now I'm working on my 3rd book, which will talk about the palliative. And I guess my mom, again, outlived the normal time frame of the disease, which is 7 to 10 years. She had it for 20. So I'm going to go back now. My podcast will be more, I guess, educational, because I get a lot of the same questions of what is the difference, what type, how do you prevent it. So I'm going to go through, I guess, chapter by chapter on kind of like what to expect. And then, I guess I'll take questions and any feedback that I get. So that's going to be like kind of the new forum for this set of podcasts. And I thank Karen because like she really pushes me. Like I'm always like, no, I don't want to, and she's like, no, you gotta continue. And so if this can help other people, other caregivers, other informal caregivers, again, I was an informal caregiver. I never ever tried to protest that I looked after my mom. Well, I did, but I mean informally. I was fortunate enough to be able to pay caregivers to come in and assist my mom day to day. And yes, of course, you have to jump in. That's just the nature of the disease. You turn into a nurse, a psychiatrist, a juggler. Like you learn so many skills. I'm grateful for being able to care for my mom all the way to the end. It was very, very challenging, heartbreaking, but I think I'm a better person for it, and I'm so happy that I was able to do that.
And she did it so well.
Thank you.
You really did. She did it so well. I can share just once her mom was in the hospital, and I went to visit her, and she looked so well.
I know.
She looked so well cared for.
I'd always get compliments on that, like that her
her skin
was like the best, and I don't know. Anyways, I'm just happy that I was able to do that. I think as a duty for my mom, and so I continue this journey, and if it could help anybody else, that's what this is going to be now. Like I'm going to make sure that if I can assist another person who's going through this.
Besides me.
Yeah.
Besides me.
And what stage is your mom?
Oh, those stages. Well, she's been severely cognitively impaired for about 2 years now, so scoring below 13.
But explain that, below 13.
Which test is it? Is it the mini mental state? No, the MOCA.
So
the Montreal.
Basically, the first step when someone's diagnosed with dementia or Alzheimer's, you do a mini mental exam, which it tests your cognition and your memory, and that's kind of like a precursor of the doctor being able to determine like how severe it is. And then of course it's followed up typically by an MRI and a CAT scan, and that will show if there's plaque in the brain.
And the CAT scan will indicate the atrophy, so the size of the brain.
So Bill's saying you did a great job looking after your mom, Karen. Thank you. And you also helped out so many of us who were going through this journey. Thanks, Bill. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. I just want to add one thing, Karen. I just hope when you continue to do the podcast, that as well as focusing on the challenges of caregiving and how our loved ones change, that there's time to talk about, just to notice there's still beautiful moments in providing care to somebody with Alzheimer's. And I think it's important to be reminded to cherish those moments, because they do happen. And then they go, and then there's another moment that comes back. So, when you see the doctors, they just tell you that it's progressive, everything is going to get worse, it's going to get harder, and it's really hard to embrace caregiving when all the information that you get from the medical profession is quite negative.
Well, that's the thing, and I know I've spoken about this before, where people romanticize this disease, and there's nothing
easy about it.
There's nothing good. Well, my personal experience is there's nothing good about it. Like, I remember from the beginning when my mom couldn't even remember, and she knew she couldn't remember. That was heartbreaking. And that, progressively you see her struggling and crying, and like, there was so many, I went through every single emotion, and she displayed every single emotion. And then her losing interest, the apathy, the total loss of interest in things that she normally enjoyed. All of that stuff is gut-wrenching. And then immediately from the diagnosis, that person's role in your life has now forever changed. Like, from the beginning of that diagnosis, I knew that I lost my mother in that context. So it's just knowing that I could not go to her for advice, and that I immediately became her mother, and I was a mother. So it was like that juggling act. However, if I had to see a plus side of it, I believe, because Alzheimer's, dementia, if you don't know, I call it like reverse aging. So, you're an adult, then you're a teenager, and that's why a bad teenager, not a good teenager, a defiant teenager, then like a toddler,
a lippy teenager.
Like I'm good, and then of course, at the end, it's reversed. So like you forget how to walk, you forget how to talk, it's complete reverse. You can't chew, you forget how to chew, so you're on puree. It's like completely near the end, and then of course the final. But I was fortunate, if you want to use that term, that my son and my mom were sort of like at the same age, so they were able to, like, my son doesn't remember this, but like, she would watch Barney with him. Like, I didn't have to watch Barney with him, so like, that was like win-win. But like, the backyardigans, like, she would
into it
and interact and like be totally into it, because I guess in her brain was the same level. So but it is if you had to really assess the situation, it really was really heartbreaking. And I feel bad because there's a few people like Bill, Kalina, there's people that started this journey kind of like with me. I mean, when I started doing the podcast, and they lost their loved one, and now I'm in that boat, and now you lose your sense of direction, and how to navigate life after that. This has been such an like 20 years, that's 2 decades of this being like the focal part of my life, and to now, like, okay, it's so weird not to have that responsibility. And how do you navigate life after caring for someone, especially with this illness? I'm not negating anybody's disease, but dementia is a brain. It's like degenerative brain disease. So you can imagine how challenging that would be if you think about your brain actually shrinks and dies. Like, neurons are dying, and how do you navigate life after? And that's where I'm at now. What do I do now with my life now that that's not like 90% of it. So, more to come. I guess there's a lot of material there for that third book, right?
Yep, there is. I'm so glad you're back, Karen.
Thanks. Well, we'll see. We'll see if this
back,
momentum
she's back.
will do anything. I'm not sure.
She's back.
But I hope so.
No,
okay.
you need to be back.
Okay.
Okay. Good night.
All right. Thanks.